Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Palanchuk. I'm the superintendent, and I'm just waiting for a few more people to join us, and we will begin our presentation today. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We're also joined by Kathy Moser, who is our assistant superintendent, and Jeremiah Bennett, whom you all know as your Lintown Elementary School principal. And we know that you have many questions about the opening of schools, and we also know that you need information to make decisions for your families. And this webinar will outline the 4 reopening plans that the administrative team has developed for the Lewisburg Area School District. The teams use the guidelines provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Health and the CDC and local recommendations from health and safety experts. And this has been also inclusive of collaborative ideas from many educators and researchers in the region working in public schools and also at Bucknell University. The format of this webinar will include an overview of the 4 openings plans, which do include the 2 plans for the district and its intention to open up school in the coming year unless the conditions in Union County or further direction comes from the governor or other officials. So right now what I'm going to do is share my screen, and hopefully I will be able to do that successfully so that you will be able to see the PowerPoint that will outline this information. And Jeremiah and Kathy, does everybody see what?
We've got the PowerPoint slides.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. We had a bit of a technical difficulty with the second one today. So I want to say from the outset that you have choices for your children. Each school districts develop plans based on their community's needs and their resources. And there will be opportunities for participants to ask questions and voice concerns. We're going to ask that they're curated in the question and answer feature on Zoom. There's comments and then there's question and answer. Question and answer, if we just put them all in one place, we may not get to all of them here, but what you've been sending so far to us has helped us guide not just this PowerPoint and knowing exactly what information the community is looking for, but also additional communications that are going to go out to the community, parents, students, and staff. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we come along here. This is our format. My overview is about 20 minutes to a half an hour or so. And then I'll ask Jeremiah to help curate the questions as they're coming through to ask. And again, if things are not completely answered here, they will be answered. We will have an FAQ, or frequently asked question document, that we've been compiling to be able to post to the community. So we have to think about the students that are going to be walking through our doors, and that's regardless of how a school district's going to open. School ended abruptly for them in the spring, and they left, and they never would have imagined that they wouldn't have finished out their school year. They wouldn't have seen their teachers or their friends. It's been very difficult for children. Certainly, they've been experiencing just everything's out of balance, off kilter. They've been isolated. The things that they normally do and play and recreational activities and sports, everything that they normally do has been suspended. And that leaves kids feeling, besides the confusion, a sense of some frustration and lack of control over their universes. So we know that we have to attend to these social and emotional needs for the students. And that is why the American Academy of Pediatrics, in their recommendations for schools and whether they should open, of course, safely, but we know that schools do so much more in terms of educating students besides just reading and math and science and social studies and all the other subject areas. This is really where kids learn, how to navigate the world, and it's a place where, they grow into the individuals that they are going to be. And we're eager to do that We believe we can do that in a safe way, but we're planned for many ways to shift if the needs shift within our current region. So school leaders have known that they would have to reopen schools at some point. However, the much needed guidance that we needed only became available in July. Question?
Jennifer, your slides again are not advancing.
Okay,
If you want to check that again like last time.
let me do that. I don't know why this was happening again. Let me exit this. Okay, we will try it again. Okay, let me go back here to you. All right, I will advance a few slides and tell me that okay. It's working now?
Yes.
It did exactly the same thing. There must be,
Right.
we'll figure out that glitch later. But I did this slide here, which is where I was. It really memorializes when we got the information that we needed to reopen schools. And that's been a frustration on the part of school leaders across the state and quite frankly, across the nation. And while some school districts have come forward with their plans and had them approved, they need to be revised with the new guidance. We fully expect to even get further guidance as we get closer to the beginning days of school and even into the school year. So this will be an iterative process. We will communicate what those changes are. And even when the guidance comes out, we sometimes need to wait for our clarifying questions to be answered. Questions about whether masks would be required were answered on July 1st through the Secretary of Health's order, and they were reinforced by the governor on the 16th of July as well as the 23rd. And we even have further clarification for what that would mean in schools. Everyone will need to wear a face covering while indoors, and there are guidelines how to provide students with masking breaks throughout the day. School districts did not receive specific guidance they needed on what would be required in reopening their health and safety plans until the 16th of July. We knew that we had to develop the plan, but what components were absolutely necessary were not made fully available to us until the 16th. Many school districts with school board approved plans will have them revised, and I suspect we will continue to have ours updated and revised as things change.
Dr. Polenchak, we are still on slide 3. I'm not sure. I do believe you're addressing dates on slide 4.
Yes.
So I'm not sure we're advancing yet as we need to.
So
let me see what I can do on this end to help you with that.
Sharing window to the front. Okay. Okay. Does everyone see reopening the dates? Jeremiah, do you?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
We're seeing once the students eventually walk through our doors.
I do apologize for this. I'm not sure why this is being
Mr. Schrader's coming to look over your shoulder.
temperamental as to Jeremiah, what do you see now?
I see reopening schools for the 2021 school year.
With a series of dates?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we are where we need to be. Thank you. Just by having our tech director simply walk into the room, you didn't have to touch anything, as it always goes. So as I was explaining, and I won't re-explain, you can see here on the slide, we really didn't have the nuts and bolts of what we needed to fully develop a plan, although we were talking about what some of those options would look like and the operational challenges within the school districts. But in terms of the health and safety components, we feel at this point we have the information we need to move forward, although, again, some things may change. So schools also have requirements for reopening, and These requirements are directly tied to the state subsidies, and there are penalties if they're not followed. First, the health and safety plan has to be board approved, and we have developed a draft that was reviewed on July 22nd by our members of our administrative staff, representative members of our teachers association, as well as our union and non-union staff. Our nurses were involved with that as well, and representatives from the Union County Department of Health and Safety, Geisinger Medical Center, and Evangelical Hospital. So we have some suggestions to go back and to add back into that plan that will be board approved in early August. And the second is the PA code requiring students 180 days of school and to receive 900 hours of elementary instruction and 990 hours of secondary instruction. School districts have the ability to reuse remote and online to count for the required hours, but the instructional hours we need to make sure that we're accounting for school student attendance, that the instruction is delivered by a certified teacher, and that all provisions of FAPE are available to the students with IEPs. It wasn't until July 6th that school districts knew how to navigate the current law, which states 180 days and those requisite hours. There's an act of legislature in the spring that alleviated us of that through Act 13, but that is in force for this school year. So it even took the Department of Education time to figure out what language they could activate within the school code. And there are many other areas where this will continue to have to happen. And that's why this is such an iterative process. I've listed there the guidelines from the various departments and organizations that have informed this plan. And as they update their information, we will continue to look and see what kinds of adjustments we need to make to our plan. Lewisburg Area School District is committed to providing a rigorous education for all of our students. And I want to emphasize that regular attendance will be taken in any of the 4 options, and students will receive grades. The online and remote options have challenges, but we've constructed these options in a way that we can still maintain accountability. So these are the 4 options that we do have. The ones that are in white are what we're planning for the beginning of this school year. Again, unless there are any conditions that change or we receive direction otherwise from the Department of Education, Health, or the governor or other officials. First, there's the in-person school that will be heavily modified and adapted for the social distancing that's required. Everyone will be required to wear masks or face coverings, and this will be enforced. We recently learned from legal counsel that masking can be enforced. The health and safety plan draft, which was reviewed by this team, does include all of the safety and mitigation measures that we need to take in order to operate in-person instruction safely. Parents do have the option to enroll their children in the Lewisburg Area School District eSchool. The eSchool is through a partnership with the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. That program is what many area school districts are using as their eSchool or virtual solution. It is an online curriculum facilitated by certified teachers. Right now, Lewisburg Area School District would have vendor-provided teachers, but if the enrollment in these options is such that 15 to 20% of students in grades K through 12 would decide that this was the best option for them, we could reassign one of our Lewisburg Area School District teachers. Now that would be 15 to 20% per grade level. So it will be important for us to know what parents' options are so that we can plan accordingly. And we have heard from parents that that is definitely something that they would prefer and like to see. For the middle school, we'd need a similar percentage to have the teachers assigned from our teaching staff. And because of certifications, it is a little bit more challenging at the high school. But again, depending upon how many, this may be able to become accommodated with our high school students. The next 2 plans that we have are the remote plan and the hybrid plan. The remote plan would be if we're ordered to shut down. And we would have school on a synchronous schedule. Our teachers would be teaching. We would ensure that the students, again, attendance is taken, grades are given, and we are working through what curriculum design and delivery model would be in place. It would look a lot like teachers meeting with their students in a Google Meet for that class period, that instruction's happening with all of their faces in the boxes. And then when the bell rings, they go on to the next class. And this is the best way we can preserve the closest experience to a normal school experience for our students. We recognize that the spring was not optimal here or really anywhere, but that was an emergency situation. We've had the time to think through this and plan. The hybrid option is where students in grade 5, K through 5, would return to school, but we would spread them between the 4 buildings. And this would provide for greater social distancing. Students in the middle and high school would have the remote and online learning going. So we know that the students in secondary can handle that a little bit better than our elementary students, and there are other considerations for our elementary students as well. There are a lot of logistical challenges to all of these models. We do know that some school districts are looking at cohorts of students where 2 students would come in 2 days a week and then do remote learning on those alternating days. But we're concerned about the delivery of instruction in those remote days and also accounting for the students' attendance and the amount of curriculum that students would be able to work through in those models. And we know that some school districts are looking at students who are opting for remote to Zoom into the classroom, and we are exploring a policy that will come forward to the school board for live streaming to be able to do that in some capacity. It's important to know that districts are working with the resources they have. That's not just their staffing resources and available staff, but also what their technology resources are. And there are things that we know that we can do for certain now, and there are things that we aren't sure how we can do that with what we have, and we may need to explore other options to be able to have that happen. And I would caution the community to consider the potential interruptions to instruction, as well as the high bar of accountability with the number of required hours in school days. The hybrid's not a recommendation at this time for that reason. Understand that what would happen in the hybrid is that the teacher would be teaching a class, but then also having to monitor that remote instruction at the same time. And we're concerned about how that would be delivered as it stands. In addition to the additional information the parents have also sought was more about what e-school is and the benefits. So with e-schools, the students still are our students. They are part of our active membership. They would be able to participate in extracurriculars, clubs, and activities. They're eligible for district services. They would receive a Lewisburg area school district report card and diploma for high school students. They receive instruction from certified teachers. Again, it would be the teacher from the vendor unless we have enough enrolled so that we could reassign one of our teachers. And the parents would still receive all of the district communications. There are benefits to the school district as well. And it's important to state that that's why we're promoting this virtual environment if this is the option for the parent over any other options that are available to them. So to speak about those a little bit, and some of these words and terms are sometimes used interchangeably, so I want to make sure that parents have the information so that they can make the best decision for their families. And we know that parents wouldn't even be considering some of these options if it wasn't for our current situation with COVID-19. But we want to make sure that you have what you need. So charter schools, there are 2 types of charters. There's the brick and mortar charter school and the cyber charter school. And then of course the private school. So tuition, it is true that charter school, brick and mortar or cyber is free to the parent, but the district actually pays the tuition for the parent. The tuition can range anywhere from $15,000 to $24,000 depending upon the grade level of the student and whether or not the student's receiving special education services. Those are funds that come out of this year's operating budget that are used to pay the tuition instead of our programs and our resources here within the district. Parents would pay for private school tuition on their own. Certified teachers. Charter schools are required to have at least 75% of their teachers certified. Private schools may not have any requirements, but many of them do. And so I don't want to misrepresent this, that there aren't certified teachers. You are assured that in public schools in Pennsylvania, all of the teachers have a Pennsylvania certification. That can be a bit variable with charter and private schools. So it's something to ask about as you're inquiring. Mitigation requirements, they are required for public schools. They are required to a degree with the charter schools. They are recommended for private schools. So that's another thing that's important to ask. What are they doing in terms of the health and safety plan for the students and staff? Students that enroll in either of these options are no longer Lewisburg area school districts students. The students cannot participate in any extracurriculars if they go to a private school. They can participate in limited extracurriculars as charter students. Homeschooling is another thing that parents have been asking about, and this isn't new. This is a program that's been available for many, many, many years. It does have some requirements, and it's important to understand what those are. So in Pennsylvania, parents that opt to homeschool their students would complete an application. They would serve as the student's teacher, which is the program coordinator, and they would need to secure a private homeschool evaluation. The school is just basically keeping records of where all of the compulsory age students are. We have no obligation to interfere in the program you provide. It needs to be aligned to standards, but there's an awful lot of flexibility in homeschooling in terms of what we see. Students would receive a homeschooling diploma from the Department of Education, and that can have some implications for future educational planning, so it's good to inquire about that as well. In terms of access to curriculum and materials, school districts have to provide the curriculum document, and they can provide textbooks. After that, they really do not have to support a homeschool student much past that. Many parents form or join consortia that are existing of homeschooling parents, and that provides that opportunity to leverage resources where if one's more comfortable teaching math and the other science, then they can, work to their expertise so the students have a good experience. And it also creates a socialization network for the students and the parents. Homeschool pods are something that can be formed too, where there's just a group of parents and students that are working together to accomplish the homeschooling. There's nothing that prohibits us from helping to support that. And if we do have parents that are interested in that because that best meets their needs, then we certainly will and would be happy to provide them with access to more resources so that this could go more smoothly for the students as they're experiencing it. Overarching goal is really increasing the health and safety measures that can be taken in the school so that students can return. And I want to say that all of the ensuing precautions that will be in place for school will be in place if we are in person or if we need to shift to a hybrid. Certainly remote, it changes because people would be, or the students would at least be at home. But we tried to make this as restrictive as we need to right now to make sure that everybody is safe. There is no one mitigation strategy that can be used without layering all of the other strategies. Masking, we know, because of how this virus is spread, is the best thing that an individual can do. But if we take masking with social distancing, washing hands frequently, cleaning and sanitation, then we know that we're preventing students from being more at risk and staff for being more at risk of contracting this virus. There is a lot of research too right now about the air ventilation and filtration because of the nature of this virus. So we are taking some steps to assess our current systems here in the district. And, we'll be talking about that a little bit more. The most important thing is staying home when you're not feeling well. And we will certainly talk about that. We look to have a health and safety forum in early August so that parents would be able to ask questions of local health and safety experts that might relate to school, but also to their own personal movement throughout the community. We think it's important to make sure everybody's as educated as possible, and there's a lot of information out there, but what the most current information is, especially as the health and safety experts are learning more and more about the nature of this particular coronavirus. I'm not going to read everything off of all of these slides. I'll just pull some highlights. These, of course, will be posted. The PowerPoint itself will be up, as well as the recording of this Zoom. So masking and social distancing, these are some of our most popular questions as to whether masks would be required. And we are going to require masks or face coverings by everybody in our schools. We're able to enforce it. We will enforce it. Masks, however, can be relaxed when students are 6 feet apart, eating or drinking, seated at a desk or a workstation, or in a designated mask break, which we know we'd have to do. Social distancing will occur everywhere: the classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, auditoriums, large group instruction spaces, gymnasiums. So we really had to spend a lot of time and are continuing to refine our plans on how we can ensure that there's appropriate social distancing. If there isn't for a certain period of time, that's why the masks are that second layer of protection for the students and the staff. We're looking at plexiglass shields for the, or plastic shields for the desks to provide another layer of protection. One-way hallways, everything will be marked. There'll be a lot of signage around to remind students about proper hygiene, but also what the expectations are within the schools. Before arriving to school, we will have parents do the health and safety screening of their students, and to keep track of that on their own. We ask that any students that would show a temperature and any of these symptoms, keep the child home from school and then seek, the consultation and advice of a medical professional about what to do next. The school nurse will take temperatures as symptoms develop throughout the day, and any students that are arriving late will be screened using our visitor health screening protocol. We typically have some students that come later at the high school, maybe to just come in for a test. They feel really lousy, but they want to come in and just get that test. We're going to work with teachers and everyone so that, one, they don't feel that anxiety to do that, because that is concerning, but also just stay home. You're not feeling well. Your immune system's not where it needs to be. And it may not be COVID-19, but you may have something else that requires medical attention. The school nurse will take the temperature of any student who develops a symptom throughout the day. And this is their standard procedure. They do this all the time. If the student's also displaying the other symptoms, she'll isolate the student with a mask, and she will then contact the parent or guardian for the student to be picked up and advise that the student be seen by his or her primary care physician. If the student remains home and is just a one-day, ran a temperature, runny nose, but is fine and fever-free, and consultation has happened with medical professional, the student can return. But if the student has a fever and any of those symptoms, they need to remain home for 72 hours. The exceptions to this will be if they have a medical diagnosis and treatment course for another illness, such as strep throat, sinus infection. If you look at the symptoms of COVID, it looks a lot like the symptoms of the normal illnesses that all people can have. We just want to make sure that we know what that is for the student to resume instruction. We're reviewing our attendance policies, which are also memorialized in state code, so we're going to need some guidance on this, but how to be flexible. We're telling people to stay home more and for a longer period of time, but we also know that there's a concern about attendance and any of the penalties that might ensue. So we are looking at how to modify the attendance policies to flex for what the needs will be of our students, but this will also be the same procedures for the staff. Okay. If we have a positive or suspected positive COVID-19 case, if the district becomes aware of this, we, either Ms. Moser or I, as we're the two individuals with the authority to do so, would be in communication with the Union County Department of Public Safety. They will then conduct the contact tracing, notification, quarantining recommendations with the individuals that are involved. This isn't something that's dictated by the school district. They have the expertise and the mechanism and the resources to do this. So it's important to know that we may or may not know all the people who might have been involved in the contact tracing or who would have been tested. So we won't be sharing any of that information because we don't have any of that information necessarily. Any communication about a case that occurs in the district will happen in consultation with the Department of Public Safety and our solicitor. We have to be mindful of the fact that all individuals are protected by HIPAA, which is a federal law. And so we can't reveal personally identifiable health information to the community. There are certain markers that have to be met for something to be shared, but we will consult with the professionals to do that. Contact tracing is case-by-case procedure. It has to do with the length of the potential exposure, the use of mitigation techniques, and the display of any symptoms. So if there's a suspected case of somebody possibly having it, it doesn't mean everybody's quarantined right away. That would be directed by the Department of Public Safety. A quarantine is the period where individuals self-isolates to see if they develop the symptoms. And whether or not they are tested, again, that is done under the direction of their healthcare provider. Many illnesses have similar symptoms to COVID-19, and that's very important to remember. And, you know, we're asking people to stay home if they're displaying any of those symptoms. One, because nobody wants to catch the other things that might be floating around, like a flu or a strep throat or something along those lines, and they're ill, so they're not really in a place to be at school. But also just given our heightened sensitivity to COVID-19, it's just better for people to take that time to recover. So transportation to and from school, parents will be encouraged to drive their students to school if they're able to do so and to allow eligible students to drive. Schools are still waiting for definitive guidelines from the Department of Education about transportation. Our plan right now is to allow 2 students per seat. Family members can share seats. The bus drivers will have masks and face shields. Masks and face coverings will be required to get on the bus, while on the bus ride, and while exiting the bus. The students will have assigned seats, and the way in which the buses are loaded and the seats are assigned will be in such a manner that we fill the back of the bus first, moving forward so that students aren't passing in the corridor, and to minimize that, and then reversing that for the return bus ride home. And buses will be cleaned every day after each run. Arrival and dismissal procedures will look different in each of the schools, and this is really unique to the school itself, its facilities, and the age of the students coming into the schools. But for certain students, we'll be reporting directly to their classrooms, and the classrooms will be monitored. So we won't be congregating students to wait to be dismissed to the classroom. Each school will develop their arrival and dismissal procedures, and that is all with the intention of minimizing the crowding to help with the social distancing. And so those schools will be putting that out to the staff, the students, and families as well. We will revise these plans and adjust as needed. It's one thing to plan for something when you're planning for it, but then it's another thing when real life people have to do that plan. So if we're seeing that something is presenting a safety hazard or is just too cumbersome, we'll look for ways to make those revisions and communicate those changes. So students will be reporting to that location in the building where they go, and will be a new location each morning, and while they're there, maintaining social distancing. The instructional spaces and experiences will be much different for our students and staff. Classrooms really will have to have minimal furniture to implement the space needed for social distancing. So we can calculate, which we're doing now, the square footage of the rooms and dividing that to see how many desks can fit at 6 feet. Rooms will vary by schools, and even within schools they vary. So we may be looking for alternative instructional spaces so that we can get to the 6 feet markers we need. And again, if we go less than that, we just need to have our mask on, but we want to plan out for 6 feet. Students will have those portable desk shields, and there's a picture of what they look like here. They're not the only measure, and that will keep them totally safe, but it definitely helps them along with the other mitigation strategies. Shared materials will be eliminated or limited depending upon what the materials are. Where we can have students just work with their own materials, we will do that. If they do need to share, we will make sure that hands are washed frequently and that the materials are sanitized both before and after use. Large group spaces will be used throughout the day, and that includes outside. We are looking for how we can have some instruction moved to the outdoors, as well as some of the breaks that students would be taking. Special subjects will look a little bit different as well. They may be held in the alternative spaces or outside, and curricular activities may be modified just because we simply can't do what we normally would do because of all these guidelines in place. If students do need to work in close proximity with one another, they will of course be masked, but they should be masked anyway, and it would be limited to 5 minutes. And this is more for a lab and science class or something along those lines that we might see in a high school class. But we're really encouraging, that teachers plan for things in a way in which students are not going to be near each other, which is much different than how they have been planning for instruction in recent times. Hallways will also be one way. Stairwells will have one-way traffic. Students can use and access the bathrooms, but they'll be monitored for crowding. Students will have their backpacks with them throughout the day or at their desks or seats. Water fountains will just have the touchless bottle filling feature activated. If we're not, and the spigots will be disabled. If that's not able to happen in some of the classrooms, then the students will be monitored as they fill their own water bottles, but we want to prevent students taking any water by mouth. All group seating will be modified for social distancing. We're looking at visits to the nurse's office. This is more of a procedural change that's an internal one in nature, but really just keeping students who are feeling ill at the nurse, but if they need a Band-Aid or they need an ice pack or something like that, that those materials, they'll be able to be secured. They don't necessarily need a nurse for that. Health screenings will be deferred, and in case of any emergency, the nurse, of course, can always come to the student's location. Students' visits to the office will also be limited, and they may be use their cell phones in the presence of a staff member to call home, for example, if they forgot something or to communicate something. Cleaning and sanitation, the buildings are cleaned every day. So that's always been a practice. We have 2 shifts. We have a day shift and we have an evening shift. So most of the cleaning happens in the evening when everybody is out of the buildings. So we'll be doing the additional cleaning every day, wiping down those high-touch surfaces, using EPA-approved disinfectants and electrostatic sprayers and misters. We do have 2 in the district, and we're getting more. They allow the custodian to mist a bathroom or a classroom or any kind of space, and it helps to bring those particles down to the ground. They definitely still do take some time, but we're looking at ways to help the custodians so that they could spend more time on the hands-on cleaning that they'll need to do. Students would only be using soap and water and towels for cleaning and wiping. We're not putting Clorox in the hands of children. And there will be proper signage posted in hallways, classrooms, in every space, reminding students about the importance of personal hygiene and all of the other mitigation strategies. Lunch, recess, and masking breaks. Students will have lunch every day. Our menus will definitely be simplified for ease of transport, because students may be taking their lunch in their classroom, outside spaces, or rotating into the cafeteria. It's good for kids to get up and get a change of venue, but we need to promote that social distancing of 6 feet, because this is when students will have their masks off. So the procedures will vary by school depending on the age of the students and just their available space to be able to do this. And the principals are working on this now. They will have scheduled masking breaks where students will be 6 feet apart and be able to take their masks off and just relax that for a period of time. And again, there are guidelines where they can take off their masks. So those things will happen naturally, but we'll also have the additional masking breaks. Hand washing before and after eating and lunch, since the hands are coming so close to the mouth. Recess procedures, of course, are also going to be revised to increase social distancing. So it may be rotations on the playground equipment or use of materials. Balls and things like that also have to be sanitized after each use. Other restrictions that we'll have in place: all non-essential visitors will be limited or restricted, and we'll administer the COVID-19 health screenings to all the visitors, and everyone is required to wear a mask or face covering. Volunteers will also be limited. I know at the elementary level, we certainly appreciate the support and help of the volunteers, so we will be working with ways in which to limit the volunteers coming in. They would still go through that same health screening and have to comply with all of the rules that are within the building. Field trips will be postponed. Clubs may be virtual. Facility use by outside groups will be restricted. And this is so that we can ensure that our custodians have the time that they need to clean the various spaces in the building and remain assured that what they just cleaned remains as such until the students return the next day. They also do have to help with the breakdown and setup of different groups that are coming in, and it's just going to be much easier to just keep our buildings open for the instruction and really keep that as our main focus. Guest speakers will also be restricted or conducted virtually. So our next steps now would be to answer any questions that you may have, and I will ask Jeremiah to curate those questions for us. And we're developing a frequently asked question guide for not just the parents, but also for the faculty and for the students, and to do it in a developmentally appropriate way for the students so they know what they're going to expect when they come back to school and what they will need to do themselves. We will be updating our website with additional resources, not just about the district's plans, but other educational materials that may be of help. And we will be administering a survey about transportation. If parents are planning on driving their students to school, or by some way they get to school other than the bus, so that we can start planning for that. And if what the commitment is to the LASD school or another option, that will certainly help us with class placement and all of the assignment of seating and arrangements that need to happen. That isn't a decision parents need to make today, but it is a decision that they'll need to make in the near future once they've had time to really consider what's the best option for their family. And I want to reiterate, we're only talking about this, and I recognize this because of the current conditions with COVID-19. We fully, hope that everybody will be right back to normal in our schools, experiencing a normal learning environment once, we're to a point that it's safe to be able to do that. So Jeremiah, if you have, if you want to open.
Sure.
Or
So we have about 40 questions currently in the queue, and I've been trying to monitor them as they've come in, and several are related by theme. There are several questions related to the idea of starting in person, but then if Union County were to go red again, or we have to pivot, what exactly are we thinking there in terms of detail?
so if we're ordered to close, we'll go remote. If we get revised guidance that then, just as we have now about the number of people that can be in a gathering, if guidance comes out with the number of students that can be in a building, what percentage of students can be in the building at the same time, we would shift to the hybrid. So remote is what we initially planned for immediately, knowing that we could be shuttered again. Now, what that means for us is that we're also going to be working with our teachers on getting the professional development that they need to be able to do the remote learning. And it will look a little bit more like school and a lot less than what it did in the spring. So that would be synchronous. Everybody's in class at the same time, basically maintaining your normal schedule. It's just we would be doing it virtually. The teachers would have access to an online curriculum, but certainly be augmenting with their own personal approaches to teaching. And we would be taking attendance and giving grades, and everything would count, which is different than the experience I know that many school districts had in the spring.
There's a couple questions related to orientation for incoming fourth graders and whether or not that would, first of all, would it happen? Second of all, would it take place online or in person?
Okay. So principals are actually talking about this now, and that's looking at how we're starting the school year exactly. We know that the orientations that would have occurred in the spring did not. And the principals would like to have the students who are the first time students coming into the building to be in for the orientation. This gives us also an opportunity to, and that would maybe be the first day of school for them, and everybody else would come the second day. So it's some modification to our calendar, and we're still working through the details there. But this allows the kids to get to know the building, to become familiar with, just what direction everything is in, where the offices are located. And we know that's an important thing because starting in any school, any new school is anxiety ridden. So anything we can do to ease students back into school would certainly go a long way.
How about sort of related to that, start and stop times? There's a couple questions about would those change or would they be the same?
Right now, they're the same. We have not changed our beginning and end times of the school day. The transition times within the school day are going to be modified. We certainly will be looking at some staggered bells, and this is more secondary, an additional lunch period. So there's some internal changes that would happen within the school day, but right now the beginning of the day and the end of the day is the same.
Another question related to the plan to provide continuity of instruction for when individual students need to miss school for long periods of time due to quarantine requirements or other to be expected situations.
Right. So it depends on what the situation is. If it's a quarantine or the child is ill but will recover in less than 10 days, then we would follow our normal procedures for when a student would be out. Certainly the teacher would provide work if we, looking at live streaming. So the students, if they're able, can see their classmates and the classmates can see them. Again, this is all situational. We would certainly provide for that. And we know there's going to be more of that with kids maybe staying home for 3-day periods of time because of fever or another illness. But we do know that this may occur. And, so we're planning for that. It's going to be, again, case by case. Now, again, if a child has an extended illness that requires homebound instruction, then we would provide the homebound instruction.
What is the deadline for parents to make a decision on the option for their students?
So we have not yet set a deadline. We're looking for that to be sometime in very early August. I don't want to give an exact date. This week, it's a lot of information coming out to the community. I know that they will need to digest it. The survey will come out at the end of the week. but more than likely 7 to 10 days afterward. And again, we also recognize parents may change their mind, and we want you to commit, but at the same for planning purposes, but we also recognize that the situations may change and parents may opt for something different because their circumstances changed.
There's a question here relating to masks. Countries that have controlled the virus require students to wear masks at all times. Why not implement masks at all times?
Well, we do know that students have to have a mask break. It's a good practice in terms of their own psychology, but with additional mitigation strategies in place. So if we think about eating and drinking, they definitely won't have their masks on at that time. But to plan those times so that kids have something to look forward to, and that, you know, we know for certain, and it's marked that students are definitely 6 feet apart for that. It would be unrealistic to think that we could get 100% compliance of all students if they never could remove their mask from the time they walked into the building and left, and just practically they will eat and drink. So we're following the guidelines from the Department of Education, which are very closely aligned to the guidelines from the CDC. If the guidelines change, then our plan for the schools would change.
Related to that, when and how often would students be allowed to take masks off?
That will depend upon the grade levels of the students. And, you know, I think we would look for something at least, you know, we haven't totally discussed this in terms of the administrators, and then looking for the location of where this would happen and all of the orchestration that would go into place. But, you know, no more than an hour, I would say, without a break. I mean, that's realistic. That's about as long as students could do it. Some breaks might be shorter or longer than others. Some may be outside, some may be in another location in the building to make sure that they're maintaining that space, but understanding that multiple classes are going to have to rotate through there in order to be able to do that.
Related to hybrid, I'll combine these two. What would trigger the hybrid mode? And then can we provide more information about how the hybrid would work in K-5? Specifically, will students in the in-person learning option share classrooms with the hybrid learning students?
So in the hybrid, we would have all of our elementary students in school. So that would be for the in-person learning. The students who have elected, or parents who have elected for the students to do the online e-school, they would continue to do that. And again, if we had a district teacher assigned to that, then that would continue. If not, then they would remain with their vendor teacher. It's just the secondary students that would go remote.
Several questions related to remote in terms of if my student begins in-school instruction, but after a time decides as a family that e-school is the better option, or vice versa. Is it possible to switch at any time, or are there certain deadlines for that?
We're looking at marking periods, which work more definitively for secondary students as natural breaking points for students to come in and out. But we also understand that, you know, we have to be flexible with families, and maybe a condition that changes in the family that necessitates that child, let's say, moving from in-person instruction to the e-school. So for example, if the family now has an elderly relative living with them who would be at higher risk, and this is a condition that changed in the family, we certainly have to take that into consideration. We don't want it to be porous where students are in and students are out all the time, because we also have to think about all the plans we have for the in-person instruction is dependent upon the number of people we anticipate coming into school. But, you know, those are, you know, certainly we would look at the natural break points for those changes to happen. But if, you know, there's a unique situation, we'll be flexible with families.
How will social distance be guaranteed for a class of over 20 students in the regular classroom? And will the student capacity be reduced, and by how much?
So what we're currently doing is looking at the space available in each of the classrooms. So some classrooms might, because there's a higher number of students and there's a larger room, they might need to flip-flop classrooms. That's a possibility. We're looking to have all the desks spaced between at least to 6 feet apart. Now, here's the thing with a guarantee: the desks are not fastened to the floor, so it's possible that things move around a little bit. We'll mark the floor for where the desk needs to be, but like just in the normal course of instruction, sometimes things get out of joint. So, you know, in terms of a guarantee that it'll be 6 feet, I'll be honest with you, I won't say that I can guarantee that at every single moment that the child's in the building, that there will always be 6 feet away from everybody. We will make every effort and implement procedures and have signage and a lot of monitoring and reminding of students to maintain that distance. But and to the best of their ability in that circumstance, but I cannot guarantee that every student will be 6 feet apart at all times.
Related to that, will students sit individually at their own desks or in groups?
They will all be seated individually.
And a question about students being assigned to a homeroom. Even if they would opt for e-school at the beginning, would they be assigned to a homeroom that then, if they decided to return mid-year or at the end of a marking period, that they would go into that homeroom?
It depends on the overall enrollment in the district. Typically what principals do when students come, a new student will come to the school district, they look to balance the sections to make sure that there's an even number of students in all of the sections that are there. On paper, that would be the plan, but depending upon how many students are actually reporting to that homeroom teacher, that may change it. So I wouldn't say that we would guarantee that. We would make an attempt to do it, but if we need to balance the classrooms better to maintain social distancing, and also just the different ratios that we look at, boy-girl composition, student needs, there's a number of things that we look at when we make a caseload for a class. So, you know, all things considered equal, then sure they can, but we have to take a look at everything that's there.
If choosing the e-school option, would parents be provided materials by the district, and would they be able to procure the same textbooks and online access as the teachers?
So for e-school, they register when they register for the e-school option, they get the technology and they get all of the materials as part of the package with e-school. It may not be exactly the same materials that our students are using right now. So they wouldn't have the district resources, the same resources that the students get in the classroom, but they would get all of the resources they need through the e-school program.
Will students share the cafeteria for lunch?
So at some point they will, but not all of them at the same time. So an entire grade level will not be in the cafeteria at the same time. Half may be in there because we will be able to maintain the social distancing, and the other half might be in their classrooms or in another space to do that. But we wouldn't be able to accommodate that, along with all the movement that just happens in a cafeteria, just with students getting their lunches and getting rid of their trash and everything like that.
A couple of medical questions. If a child has a chronic condition which presents as symptoms from the list, will they also be expected to stay home when symptoms are present?
So the best thing I can recommend for that is that if your child has a chronic condition, to discuss that with your healthcare provider, and also to provide a note that in schools, the nurse is the best person to talk to about that, and the nurse will work with you. So if a child, I know we've had a question about asthma and some other chronic conditions that can look symptomatic, but in fact it's the asthma working up, the nurse would just want to be checking in with the child more to ensure it is the asthma and help with the treatment of that. But we wouldn't ask, if we know for certain it's asthma and it's not potentially COVID, then we wouldn't ask for them to isolate themselves or stay home for some period of time, because they're just in a phase where that's affecting them more.
Related to that, will PRN medications be allowed to be carried by the student to decrease nurse visits, for example, an inhaler or an EpiPen?
I will have to check the policy on that as it's written, and there are a number of policies that we have to check. So I'll ask Ms. Moser to put that on the list. Some it is possible to have in policy, and I'm not sure that our policy says that if a child's at a certain maturity level and demonstrates to the nurse that they can self-administer, then they can, and then they can have those materials on them, and this would be EpiPens, asthma inhalers, things of that nature.
Back to the e-school topic, how much lead time will the district require to switch a student from in-person instruction to e-school or vice versa?
Ms. Moser, if you can answer that question, as you have some more experience with that.
I'd be happy to take one for you here for a moment, Dr. Polinchak, and let you catch your breath. Typically, when a student's family comes in and sits down with the school counselor and enters into the agreement, we in turn then need to reach out to the company, put the enrollment in. It often has just a 24-hour or at best day and a half turnaround. Certainly there'll be increased volume. Certainly across Pennsylvania, 128 school districts utilizing these programs. They have the ability to obviously deliver economy and scale, and so they're going to certainly work to do it quickly. So if I say on average 1 to 2 days turnaround, I'm comfortable sharing that. Of course, we're going to experience it here in a manner unlike we have to date, because we haven't had a pandemic and a concern perhaps for increased numbers of families. We want to be responsive to families' needs and situations. We want it to move as quickly as possible. So again, because they're still our students, we want to work through our school counselors and school administrators, and we certainly seek to move that quickly, and we'll learn as we go forward.
Thank you. A couple transportation questions. How will the bus system work with those that go to Lintown first and then to Kelly? There might be students that get on the bus first but need to get off at Lintown, and they are now walking past all the other students on the bus.
Right. That's something we'll have to check on what that procedure would look like. I don't have an answer, but that's an important thing for us to keep in mind in our planning, that we definitely need to have a process for that to happen.
And then related to that, if I have 3 children on the same bus, can they all sit together?
From what we understand, that's fine, because they're sharing the same space at home. So that would be permissible, but they'd be assigned as such.
When will LASD know if we have enough students in a grade to allow for the teachers to teach virtual classes?
So shortly after the deadline of when that would occur. We're looking at, again, the survey going out at the end of the week, and at least 7 to 10 days for people to respond. So I would think 2 or 3 days probably after that. We would want to let you know if that's happening in terms, we don't want to delay it in terms of us assigning the teachers. That's a whole other process that we need to go through, but to say that we will have a teacher for you, we can do that shortly thereafter.
What day will be Lintown early dismissal for cleaning, and what time will the kids be dismissed?
It's Wednesdays, so we're dismissing on Wednesdays early. And Jeremiah, lunch for you, it's 12:30?
Correct.
Yes, yeah, so it's right after lunch. The students will have their lunch, and then they'll be dismissed.
Is the school thinking about special filters for safer ventilation?
Yes, we are. So we did receive a quote from Siemens, who oversees our operations of our HVAC and other systems, and we'll be reviewing that tomorrow. This is, certainly something, even more mitigation strategies like this are really something that we're interested in looking in, because it's not just COVID-19. This is a permanent solution that will help in every cold and flu season that we see every year. There's always a nasty bug that goes through a school. And if we can reduce the number of people getting sick, because that's never any fun to have any of these kinds of illnesses, but also, just so that it's not creating the disruption with children missing school and staff missing school. So it's a healthier environment. And that's really where we see an opportunity here to really do something that is not necessarily brand new technology, but not technology that many schools have installed.
There's a couple here. When will school supply lists be provided? And I can speak to that myself, I believe. We had our Power School rollover this past Friday, and both Kelly and Lintown are currently working on transitioning student names into Power School and being able to generate our placement letters. And the supply list letters will come home with the placement letters. Timeline for that is looking like the beginning to the middle part of next week that we can get those in the mail. Both Mr. Rule and myself like to coordinate that so that one building of parents is not waiting on the list when the other building receives them. So that's kind of the timeline for that. And then there was also a question related to unfamiliar with Lintown structure with an incoming fourth grader. Are students moving classrooms, or will they stay in one classroom throughout the day?
So yeah, they don't switch for subjects, but generally speaking, the students are in that classroom. The only time they would switch is for a special. We are exploring, depending upon the special, if that specialist teacher can maybe travel to the students. It depends on that special and whether or not that can happen, and all the materials can also get there that the kids might need. For example, art class, a lot of materials, it might just be easier for the students to go to the art classroom, but they don't switch. They're not departmentalized where they have a different teacher. Correct, Jeremiah?
With the exception in fourth grade, they do switch for science and social studies.
Social studies.
And then in fifth grade, they are departmentalized in terms of math and reading.
Okay.
So the math teacher would do science typically, and the reading teacher would do social studies typically.
Okay. So it's something that we're looking at, and we may decide that we can still maintain everything as it is. We may decide that it may just be safer, and that's a change really in our teaching organization and procedures. So cohorting is something that's recommended, that students really kind of stay together with the same group of students all the time, and you minimize introducing new people into the group.
Have any decisions been made about after school care? Mrs. Moser, I don't know if that's a SAC reference.
It is.
Okay.
It is probably. At this point, we plan and have begun to work with what is yet a different set of guidance and regulations. That's Department of Health, as well as Department of Early Childhood Education, to make sure we can meet their regulations. It is our intention to open. And I saw one, Mr. Bennett as well, that asked even on early dismissal day. Yes, at this point, we realize as we impose a change in a daily schedule, such as a Wednesday half-day dismissal, we want to be able to help families and be responsive to needs for childcare. So look for all of that to come out as part of our total plan and the specific details for that.
Back to cleaning, will student desks be wiped down or disinfected by custodians every day?
Yes. Yes, that's part of the cleaning procedures that we know it's a high touch surface. Their hands are all over it. And not even just the tops of the desks, but the under surfaces as well.
What if there is a sick family member in the household? Will there be recommendations of the student to stay home so that they do not potentially spread while not showing signs themselves?
It would depend on what the illness is. I would first advise that if that family member is ill, to have that discussion with your healthcare provider. And if there are any questions beyond that, if there's a suspected that the person might have been exposed to COVID or is awaiting a test, that's when contacting me or Kathy Moser. I can then contact the Department of Health on a specific question like that, and that would be fine. Understand too that we're bound by that confidentiality, so that would not be shared with anybody who has no need to know and really wouldn't have any need to know. It's just the child's out. They're out until they come back.
If choosing to enroll in eSchool, will the kids be allowed to come into the school for music, orchestra, and band? And will orchestra and band be happening?
So they would not be allowed to come in school for those specials. And the reason for that is the cohorting. Again, introducing a student that's not typically part of the group. And so we have a concern about that. And also we're creating a porous system within the school of kids coming in and out. Those times and everything like that can change and shift depending upon the needs of the school. So while we try and have a static schedule, sometimes that's not the case because of things that need to happen during the course of the day. We are looking at music to continue. We are still looking at how we might be able to do some of those ensemble groups with the social distancing and other health requirements that would be necessary for music.
Will Lintown students have school-issued iPads or laptops for assignments? I can take that. Yes, they will. At Lintown, we do have iPads, and they currently, as we transition into this year, both 4th and 5th grade will have the same iPad that has a wireless keyboard as part of the protective case that the iPad is embedded in. Our incoming 5th graders, for the most part, kept their iPads with them. We did not collect those in the spring, and our 4th graders will receive them hopefully in person here as we kick off the school year.
I'm looking at the time. We're at about 4:10. We've gone a little bit over. That's okay. This is only actually scheduled where it will automatically turn off at 4:15. So I want to maybe just take 1 or 2 more questions. For questions that weren't yet answered, we can capture them in the chat and Q&A section. So we'll incorporate those into the FAQ. And if there's something that's specific to an individual, we'll be able to reach out to you with a response.
Okay. Are the classrooms air conditioned? If not, is there a plan to get air conditioning in the classrooms?
So the classrooms are not air conditioned. It is something, and this predates me coming to the district. It was explored and that option wasn't done. Right now, it's not just a matter of putting in even individual air conditioning units, or if we went to centralized air, there's a lot of HVAC work and electrical work that would need to be done to accommodate that. So I know it's something that parents are asking about, especially the comfort of the students in the beginning of the year when it still can be very hot. But we do not have plans to have air conditioning in by the start of school this year.
Given everything that still needs to be determined to start successfully, is there any consideration to postponing the current first school day?
So that is something we are currently discussing. The school calendar itself is set by the school board. So the board would have to vote on a new calendar. We're looking, of course, with bringing in students that are new to the building to have just 1 day with them in the school so they can get used to it, do the orientation, and have transition those students smoothly with the other students coming the following days. We're assessing the calendar to see if we can front load some of the professional development. Right now, it's not changing. Quite honestly, I'd be a little more concerned about any changes that might have to happen once we're really in the middle of flu and cold season. So the things that I don't have answers for are just they're very good questions, but they are things we're still working through that I'm confident we will have resolved by the first day of school. So right now, I would plan for school starting on the calendar date that's set of August 20th.
Any additional explanation of the misting machines that will be used for cleaning? What agents are in the spray, and is it available, a list of ingredients available?
We can certainly provide that, and we will post that information. I know that tomorrow morning, all the principals are going to watch a demonstration of this with our Director of Facilities and Operations. So, and so we can actually catch a video of that so you can see what that looks like. But we will post that, and it's FDA approved. It's materials that can be sprayed around food. I wouldn't consume them myself, but it means they're safe enough to be around humans and anything that people would eat.
Do the eSchool programs offer specials, art, music, etc.?
Yes, they do.
I'm going to have to, we're going to be caught off. So this, as you know, will be recorded. We will curate the rest of your questions. I do want to thank everybody for their time. If there are additional questions that you think of, or you know, something you haven't heard back from, please feel free to email myself and Kathy Moser. We will be getting back to people. I've been trying to get back to people as we're going along. And, you know, we want to make sure you have the information that you need to make the decision that's the best decision for your family. So I thank you for your time this afternoon. Okay. Bye-bye.